Hello, everyone, and welcome to 100 Yards of Football Sports Talk Radio. I'm your host and producer this evening, Logan Landers, and join me to talk about this NCAA Week 11 game preview between Michigan and Penn State. As always, Mr. Football, Vincent Turner. How you doing this afternoon, sir?
Hey, I'm doing fantastic, man. We're rolling. We're winding down the college football weekend, the season. Hey, man, it's going to be two teams at the end of the year. It's going to be playing for the national championship. And one of these two teams that's on the screen right now, the one Michigan, might be in the college football national championship game.
We will see what happens, and it's going to be a fun game this weekend for sure. Before we get started, though, guys, if you enjoyed this episode, this video, give us a like, also comment, and be sure to share it with everyone you know, and also subscribe so you don't miss a single episode. We go live each and every single week on Facebook and, of course, on YouTube, our main platforms there. But if you want to check us out on our podcast network, that is thanks to our friends at the Believe Podcast Network. We are available on every major podcast streaming platform you can think of: Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iTunes, iHeartRadio. You name it, you can find us under the same name, same banner, 100 Yards Football Sports Talk Radio. Mr. Turner, let's get right into it. Talking about the Michigan Wolverines. Everyone seems to be talking about their off-the-field issues at the moment, but we're keeping it on the field as always and talking about what Wolverines, what Jim Harbaugh, what they've been up to this year. Perfect 9-0, currently ranked the number 3 team, and are sitting pretty right now looking for that college football playoff national championship. And my goodness, they have looked locked and loaded since really the season began. I mean, they really have not even had a tough task. They've steamrolled all of their opponents, but this is going to be a tough task for them going up against Penn State, a really good challenge. Let's talk about these Wolverines. Of course, you are led by your main guy, passing leader, J.J. McCarthy, your leader there. Over 2,000 yards for him. He's got 18 touchdowns, 3 INTs, a man who I think has taken a really big step as opposed to last year. Everyone was talking about Blake Corum last year. Well, right now, J.J. McCarthy is looking really, really solid as a QB. He's made some really good leaps this year. It's helping out Michigan 100%. I just mentioned Blake Corum. Let's talk about him, what he's been up to this year. 126 carries to the young man for 649 yards, 5.2 average, and he's got 16 touchdowns. My goodness, if you get near the end zone, you know exactly where the ball's going. It is going to be in his hands. Receiving game, you've got some absolute studs like Roman Wilson, Cornelius Johnson, Colston Loveland, Donovan Edwards, A.J. Barner. The list goes on and on with the amount of talent that this team has. Roman Wilson also 10 touchdowns, Vincent, a 16.4 average per catch. That is elite, and that's why he's one of the best receivers in the NCAA. And then you flip it over to their defense. You've got some really good players over there, such as Junior Colson, who's leading your team in tackles by a good margin. You got Josiah Stewart, 4.5 sacks. Jalen Harrell, 3.5. Derek Moore with 3. And those guys are putting in some work. All in all, Michigan's got 22 sacks on the QB this year. And then let's flip it to the secondary. They've got some really good players like Mike Santrissel, got Keon Slab, and Will Johnson. Those guys getting your bulk of interceptions. They've got 12 picks. 32 passes defended. I mean, when you look at this Michigan team, Vincent, it's hard to find any holes in their lineup, and that's why they're a perfect 9-0 this season, and they are looking locked and ready to roll into that college football playoff national championship picture. What's your thoughts on the Wolverines so far this season and how they can get a win this upcoming Saturday?
Well, let me start with this. Kudos to the University of Michigan fan base. Right now, that's a weird situation going over in the Big Ten with the Big Ten saying that Michigan was cheating. But when I look at college football and I look at it on the scope, it doesn't take a fool or idiot or anybody to realize that everybody cheats at this game in recruiting, in every other facet. But it's like, to me, the NCAA and everybody has a target on Jim Harbaugh's back. So that being said, it's not going to take away on this great football team and the great season they've had this year. Remember before the preseason, what did Michigan say, Logan? The fan base, the coaching staff, and all the players. We got to get on the level and be comparable to the University of Georgia. That's the team we got to take our model and model them and what they've done over the years. Looking at their defense this year, They haven't allowed 200 yards total offense in the game. They're only allowing 6 points. They've given up only 60 points this year. They've only allowed 3 yards per rush. That's championship football. Offensively, they've really surprised me. Their quarterback, J.J. McCartney, he's another guy right now that the NFL scouts are loving. They're averaging almost 40 points on offense under him, under center. We talk about Blake Horn, going to be another high draft pick at the running back position. Junior Closen, an outstanding linebacker, has played very well this year. Him and Michael Barrett, 81 total tackles. This is a Michigan team that's very solid, man. And a lot of people saying, well, they haven't really played anybody, but they played everybody that's in front of them, man. And you looking at this, they're going into Penn State this weekend, a road game. They're going to be tested, but I think this Michigan team is a little bit different. I think when Jim Harbaugh took the position, he said, hey, this is why I wanted to get the program back to winning national championships. Now, it's taken them He's been there, 9 years, I believe. But he's got the Michigan Wolverines as a top 5 program in the country, and I don't think that's going to slow down Saturday. And I'm going against Penn State. This is a really balanced, good football team, man. Yes, solid on the offensive line, solid on the D line. And all I know is that the people that's been put in front of them, they have really played well. Like I said, Logan, they've only defensively given up 60 points all year. They have not allowed a team offensively to gain 200 total yards in the game. That's what we call total dominance. And they're averaging 40 points a game.
Yeah, and you brought up a good point too, Vincent. And this is their big, tough task so far this season against Penn State. But that's what the great teams do. If they're facing lesser quality opponents, you're supposed to beat them. You're supposed to beat them by a lot of points. You're supposed to not give up a lot of yards. And that's exactly what Michigan's done. And that's what's keeping them rolling so far. That's why they're the number 3 ranked team right now in the country. And that's why they've been dominating teams left and right each and every single week now. 10 weeks. But let's talk about Penn State. Let's flip this script. Penn State, we talked about them a few weeks ago in that game against Ohio State. I remember I picked them to win that one in an upset. Did not go my way. They lost 20-12. Their only loss so far in the season. Since that loss against Ohio State, they've came back and beaten Indiana, and they beat Maryland last week 51-15. Looking at this team, though, at Penn State, we know they've got some really good, solid players. Of course, your quarterback, Drew Aller, who's been kind of a surprise this year to a lot of people, a guy who's kind of came from out of nowhere unless you know the program, and he's looked really good, closing in on 2,000 yards. He's got 20 touchdowns and only 1 interception. Only been sacked 11 times as well. That is efficient work from the young man. He's really helping them out, and that's why Penn State has done so well this year. Running game, you've got some absolute studs with Nicholas Singleton, Katron Allen, and Bo Priobla as well. They can get him in there some also. All in all, they've got 20 rushing touchdowns on the year. Penn State, they can get it done either side. If you want to throw it, if you want to run it, it don't matter. They just score points. Receiving game, Keandre Lambert-Smith, your top guy, 645 and 51 grabs. Number 1 receiver by far. He's got 4 touchdowns. Theo Johnson, your tight end, and Tyler Warren, your other tight end, little duo package there. Both those guys over 200 yards receiving. They've got 10 touchdowns combined. Going to the defense, this is where they got to get going here. This is where they have to play stout defense if you want to get the win this week. Curtis Jacobs leading your team with 36 tackles. Abdul Carter right behind him with 35, and Jalen Reed not too far behind with 32. Look at your sacks leader, Adisa Isaac, 6.5. That man is an absolute monster there on the D-line. And also Johnny Dixon behind him. He's got 3 from the cornerback slot, and they have been looking absolutely tremendous this year, Vincent. They have 38 sacks. 38. That is far and away the biggest number we've seen covering in terms of how they've been able to get to the quarterback in all these teams. They know how to put some pressure on the QBs. And then in your secondary, you've got some really good players like Daquan Hardy. I mentioned Johnny Dixon earlier, Abdul Carter. They've got some absolute studs back there as well. They've got 10 picks and 25 passes defended. So I am really looking forward to seeing how this Michigan offense goes up against that stout defense of Penn State. I think it's going to be a tremendous ball game this Saturday, Vincent. What can Penn State do to get this big win?
I'm gonna say this about Penn State. Great tradition. The late great Franco Harris, Lydell Mitchell, LeVar Arrington, great players have played at a great university. Very impressive what they did against Maryland last week. Had 12 tackles for loss. And since we're talking about defensively, 6 sacks in that game over Maryland, a very good Maryland team. But when you look at Penn State, I look at their head coach, James Franklin. I call him the Chico de Bar to college football, the best looking guy in all of college football. The bottom line, Penn State hasn't had a big win under him, under his tenure, any top 25 team. They've been in these situations before. Hey, we think Penn State going to win this game. Okay, we think they're going to be a team that's going to be challenging for a national championship. Adul Carter is an excellent football player defensively. Caleb King is an excellent football player. Kevin Winston is an excellent football player defensively. All the great numbers that you brought up just a few seconds ago by how good this team is, both on both sides of the ball. But for me, James Franklin, you've been there long enough, baby. You won, I don't know, you won in 20. I can't think of the number right now against top 25 teams. You come into these games like this, and everybody think you finna turn the corner. James Franklin, you on the clock, baby. This is your time. Michigan coming in number 1 in a lot of people's eyes. Number 2 in the college football polls. If you don't win this game, what we going to think about Penn State, Logan?
That's a good question. That's a good question, Mr. Turner.
Close, no cigar. James Franklin, you haven't won a big one. And you know what? Looking at this football game here, I know Penn State has played at a high level. They got the home field coming into this game. But for my money, I just think this Michigan Wolverines football team is too good and too talented. And I'm going to leave it at that.
All right, sir. Well said. Final prediction time for me. You hit the nail on the head. I picked Penn State against Ohio State, thinking they could maybe turn that corner and get that big win. They lost in a close one, and I just can't go back to them right now, Vincent. Not with as good as Michigan has been looking. They've got a lot of love, a lot of hate that's fueling them this season. And most importantly, man, they just have a tremendous football team. So I'm going to go with the Michigan Wolverines taking the win in this one, like you mentioned, on the road. Give me Michigan. I'll go Michigan 35, and I will go Penn State 24. That's my final prediction of this one. Mr. Turner, your final score.
I think both teams have top-level, top 10 defenses. But Penn State, we saw what they did a couple of weeks ago in a big game against Ohio State. They had trouble putting the ball in the end zone. I just think this Michigan football team is too good, too bad, too awesome. Jim Harbaugh has built an outstanding football culture up there in his years being up there. And he said, hey, who don't want to be like us? I think Michigan is going to win that football game 24-17.
All right. Well, y'all heard it here first. Our final predictions for this Week 11 matchup here between Penn State and Michigan. As always, Mr. Football, Vincent Turner, a pleasure talking sports with you each and every single week. I've been your host and producer, Logan Landers. Go check out the rest of our videos we've done so far. Like I said, each and every single week we have videos on our Facebook and YouTube channel, as well as our podcast. Hey, enjoy some college football this weekend, everyone.